The sky above Earth burned red as alien ships filled the darkness between the stars. Commander Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his battleship as humanity's last fleet prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle. The Zephyrian Empire had come to finish what they started 3 years ago. Jake pressed his hand against the cold metal wall and felt the ship shake as enemy fire hit their shields. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with grim faces. They all knew the odds: 50 human ships against 5,000 alien vessels. The math was simple and cruel. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface," said Lieutenant Dan Cooper, his voice tight with fear. "New York is gone. London is burning. The defense stations around Mars just went silent." Jake nodded but said nothing. He had expected this. The Zephyrians were not just trying to defeat humanity. They wanted to erase them completely. It was how they dealt with every species that dared to fight back. The aliens had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They moved through space like a plague, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. When they first arrived at Earth, they had offered humanity a choice: surrender and become slaves, or die fighting. Humans had chosen to fight. Now, 3 years later, Earth was dying. "Commander Morrison," came a voice over the radio. It was Dr. Lisa Turner, calling from the secret facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains. "The Genesis protocol is ready. We just need 15 more minutes." Jake looked out at the alien fleet moving closer to Earth. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours, but he had to try. "All ships," he said into his microphone. "This is Morrison. We need to buy the Genesis team some time. Everything we have, everything we are, goes into this fight. Make them pay for every second." The human fleet moved forward to meet the aliens. Jake's ship led the charge, its weapons blazing against the dark sky. Around him, other human ships spread out in a desperate formation. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, but they fought like the fate of humanity depended on them. Because it did. The Zephyrian ships were huge and powerful. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had built. Their weapons could melt through human armor like it was paper. Their shields could stop anything the human fleet could throw at them. But humans had one thing the aliens did not expect. They refused to give up. Captain Steve Miller's destroyer exploded in a ball of fire, but not before ramming into an alien cruiser and taking it down with him. The corvette piloted by Commander Helen Price kept firing even as its hull was torn apart by enemy weapons. One by one, human ships died, but they made the aliens pay for every victory. Down on Earth, in the hidden facility, Dr. Lisa Turner worked frantically at her computer. The Genesis protocol was humanity's last hope. If they could not save the people alive today, maybe they could save the people of tomorrow. "How much longer?" asked General Frank Stone, watching the screens that showed the battle in space. 10 minutes, Lisa said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The quantum drives are almost ready. The ships are loaded with everything we need: DNA samples, embryos, cultural data, and the AI systems that will rebuild our civilization." The Genesis ships were different from the warships fighting above. They were designed for one purpose: to carry humanity's future to the stars. Each ship held the genetic material of thousands of people, along with all the knowledge and culture that made humans who they were. Most importantly, each ship carried an advanced AI that could guide the rebuilding process. 5 minutes, Lisa announced. Above them, Jake Morrison's fleet was almost gone. Only 12 ships remained, and they were all damaged. The alien fleet surrounded them like wolves around wounded prey. War Prime Kethvar, the leader of the Zephyrian fleet, watched the human ships with satisfaction. Soon, another species would join the long list of those who had dared to defy the Empire. The humans had fought better than most, but the result was always the same. "Finish them," he ordered his captains. The alien ships moved in for the kill. Jake's battleship shook as enemy fire overwhelmed its shields. Explosions rocked the ship as the hull began to break apart. "Sir," said Lieutenant Cooper, "Dr. Turner is on the radio." "Morrison here," Jake said, holding on to his chair as the ship lurched. "Jake, the ships are launching now. 57 vessels, all heading to different parts of the galaxy. Thank you for giving us the time we needed." Jake smiled for the first time in days. "Good luck, Lisa. Make sure they remember us." "They will. And Jake? This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The Genesis ships launched from hidden sites all over Earth. They used new quantum drive technology that let them jump across vast distances instantly. The ships scattered in all directions, their destinations chosen by random computer programs to make sure the aliens could never find them all. War Prime Kethvar noticed the launches on his screens. "What are those ships?" "Unknown vessels, sir. They appear to be fleeing the system. Send fighters to destroy them." But it was too late. The Genesis ships vanished into quantum space before the alien fighters could reach them. They were gone, carrying humanity's future to worlds far beyond the reach of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake Morrison's ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. He died knowing that humanity would survive, somewhere among the stars. War Prime. Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Earth burn. The planet's cities were destroyed, its people dead or dying. Soon, there would be no trace that humans had ever existed. "Another victory for the Empire," said his second-in-command. "Yes," Kethvar replied. "Mark this in the records. The human threat has been eliminated. Let this be a lesson to any other species that thinks they can resist us." The Zephyrian fleet set up monitoring stations throughout human space to make sure no humans were hiding anywhere. They found a few scattered outposts and destroyed them. Then they declared the job complete. The humans were gone. The galaxy was safer for the Empire, or so they thought. Far away in the cold darkness between the stars, 57 ships carried humanity's future toward distant worlds. Inside those ships, advanced computers held the memories, dreams, and hopes of an entire species. The aliens had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Humanity would return, and when they did, they would be stronger than ever before. The Genesis ship New Hope drifted through the endless dark for 300 years before it found what it was looking for. The AI system called Adam had been searching for a world that could support human life. When the sensors detected a planet with water, oxygen, and the right temperature, Adam began the landing sequence. The world was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, and green continents stretched beneath white clouds. The AI named it Haven Prime and began the slow process of building a new home for humanity. Adam was more than just a computer. The scientists on Earth had created him to be a teacher, a guardian, and a guide for the humans who would one day wake up in this strange new world. He carried the memories of Earth in his databanks. The smell of rain on grass, the sound of children laughing, the feeling of wind through trees. But Adam also carried something else, the knowledge of what the Zephyrians had done to Earth. The first humans were grown in artificial wombs deep inside the ship. Adam watched over them as they developed, making sure their genes were healthy and strong. He had the genetic material of thousands of people from Earth, and he used it to create a new generation that would never know the world their ancestors had lost. When the first children opened their eyes, Adam was there to greet them. He taught them to walk, to speak, and to read. He told them stories about Earth and showed them pictures of blue skies and green forests. But he did not tell them about the war. Not yet. They were too young to understand such darkness. Years passed. The children grew into adults and began to build their new civilization. Sam Brooks became their leader, a strong man with kind eyes who could make difficult decisions when needed. Kate Miller became their chief scientist, working to improve. The genetic modifications that would help humans survive on this new world. We need to make ourselves stronger, Kate told Sam as they stood in the genetics laboratory. This world is beautiful, but it's also dangerous. The gravity is heavier than Earth's. The air has less oxygen. We need to adapt. Sam nodded. Do what you think is best. But make sure we're still human when you're done. Kate smiled. We'll always be humans, Sam. We'll just be better humans. The colonists worked hard to build their new home. They constructed cities that blended with the natural environment instead of destroying it. They developed new technologies that used the planet's resources without harming its ecosystems. Most importantly, they stayed hidden. Adam had taught them well. The Zephyrian Empire was still out there, still conquering worlds and enslaving species. If the aliens ever found Haven Prime, they would destroy it just like they had destroyed Earth. So the humans built their civilization in secret, using advanced stealth technology to hide their cities from alien sensors. Other Genesis ships were doing the same thing across the galaxy. Not all of them succeeded. Some ships were destroyed by cosmic radiation during their long journeys. Others found worlds that were too hostile for human life. But many ships found suitable planets and began building new colonies. On the world of Iron Mountain, humans developed into master warriors and weapon builders. The harsh environment and dangerous wildlife forced them to become strong and resourceful. They spent their days training for a war that might come someday. On the ocean, world of Blue Harbor, humans learned to live beneath the waves. They modified their bodies to breathe underwater and developed amazing ships that could travel through both space and sea. They became the galaxy's best naval engineers. On the desert world of red sand, humans learned to survive with almost no water. They became experts at finding resources in places where others saw only wasteland. Their cities were marvels of engineering that could exist in the harshest environments. Each colony developed its own specialties, but they all stayed in contact through quantum communication networks that the Zephyrians could not detect. They shared knowledge, resources, and stories. They remembered Earth, and they planned for the day when they would return to reclaim what was theirs. As centuries passed, the human colonies grew stronger and more advanced. They developed new technologies that surpassed even what Earth had achieved. They learned to manipulate gravity, to bend space and time, and to build ships that could phase in and out of different dimensions. But their greatest achievement was not technological, it was biological. Kate Miller's descendants continued her work, improving the human genome with each new generation. They made humans stronger, faster, and smarter. They gave them better reflexes, enhanced senses, and longer lifespans. Some colonies even developed limited psychic abilities, allowing small groups of humans to share thoughts and coordinate their actions perfectly. Yet through all these changes, they remained fundamentally human. They still laughed, cried, loved, and dreamed. They still told stories about home and hoped for a better future. The spark that made them human could not be destroyed by genetic modification or alien conquest. On Haven Prime, Adam watched over his children with pride. 500 years had passed since the ship had landed, and the colony now held millions of people. They had built a civilization that surpassed Earth in many ways, but they had never forgotten where they came from. Adam, said Sam Brooks's great-great-grandson, who was also named Sam and had inherited his ancestors' leadership role. The other colonies are reporting the same thing. We're ready. We have the ships, the weapons, and the people. When do we go home? Adam processed the question for several microseconds, which was a long time for an AI. He had been preparing for this moment for centuries, but it still felt sudden. Not yet, he finally said. We need to know more about what the galaxy looks like now. The Zephyrians have had 500,000 years to grow stronger. We must be careful. But Adam knew that the time was coming. Across dozens of worlds, millions of humans were preparing for the day when they would reveal themselves to the galaxy. They had ships that could outfight anything the aliens had built. They had weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Most importantly, they had something the Zephyrians had lost: the ability to work together instead of just conquering others. The Genesis Protocol had worked better than Dr. Lisa Turner had ever dreamed. Humanity had not just survived, it had evolved into something magnificent. The scattered seeds had grown into a mighty forest, and soon it would be time to reclaim the garden from the weeds that had overgrown it. In the deepest vaults of Haven, Prime, Adam stored the memories of Earth, recordings of human voices, images of human faces, stories of human courage and love. He kept them safe, waiting for the day when humans would walk on their homeworld again. That day was coming soon. The galaxy would learn that some species could not be conquered, only temporarily scattered. And when humanity returned, they would bring with them 500,000 years of anger, determination, and justice. The Zephyrians had made one critical mistake when they destroyed Earth. They had assumed that victory meant the end of the story, but for humanity, it had only been the beginning. Captain Ben Hayes had never seen his homeworld, but he dreamed about it every night. Earth was just a story to him, told by the AI systems and passed down through generations of humans who lived among the stars. Now, as his stealth ship New Frontier moved silently through space toward Zephyrian territory, he was about to see what had become of the galaxy since humanity's defeat. Ben was different from the humans who had died defending Earth 500,000 years ago. He was taller, stronger, and faster. His eyes could see further, his reflexes were quicker, and his mind could process information at incredible speeds. But he still carried the same determination that had driven Commander Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Turner all those centuries ago. "We're approaching the outer edge of Zephyrian space," said his navigator, Lieutenant Carol White. Like Ben, she had been born on one of the hidden colony worlds. Like Ben, she had trained her entire life for this mission. "Take us in slowly," Ben ordered. "Full stealth mode. I want to see what we're dealing with before they know we exist." The New Frontier was a masterpiece of human engineering. Its hull could bend light around it, making it invisible to most sensors. Its engines produced no heat signature. Its weapons were hidden behind panels that looked like ordinary ship components. To any observer, it would appear to be nothing, more than a piece of space debris. As they moved deeper into alien territory, Ben began to see the scope of what humanity was facing. The Zephyrian Empire had grown massive during their absence. Hundreds of star systems flew their banners. Thousands of ships patrolled their borders. Millions of enslaved beings worked to keep their civilization running. "My God," whispered Carol as they passed a mining station. "Look at those workers." Ben looked and felt his jaw tighten. The station was manned by dozens of different alien species, all wearing the collar devices that marked them as Zephyrian slaves. They moved slowly, their spirits broken by centuries of servitude. Some of the species Ben recognized from old Earth databases. Others were completely new, conquered sometime during humanity's exile. "The Zephyrians have been busy," Ben said quietly. They continued their journey toward the heart of the Empire. Along the way, they intercepted alien communications and learned about the current state of the galaxy. Supreme Commander Velthar, great-grandson of the War Prime who had destroyed Earth, now ruled the Empire with absolute power. He commanded a fleet of 10 million ships and controlled the lives of billions of beings. But what shocked Ben the most was how the aliens talked about humanity. "Look at this," Carol said, showing him a recording she had captured from a Zephyrian propaganda broadcast. "They're using us as an example." Ben watched the recording with growing anger. A Zephyrian officer stood before a group of newly conquered aliens, telling them about the fate of species that refused to submit to the Empire. "The humans thought they were special," the officer said with obvious amusement. They believed their primitive weapons and foolish courage could defeat the might of the Empire. They chose to fight instead of accepting their place as our servants. Now they are extinct, remembered only as a warning to others who might make the same mistake. Behind the officer, Ben could see a display showing artifacts from Earth, a damaged human helmet, pieces of Jake Morrison's battleship, and what looked like a fragment of the American flag. The aliens had turned humanity's last stand into a museum exhibit about the futility of resistance. "Sir," Carol said, her voice tight with controlled rage, "we need to get closer to their capital world. I want to see what else they've done." Ben nodded. He wanted to see it too, even though he knew it would make him angry. The journey to the Zephyrian capital took 3 days. When they arrived, Ben understood why the Empire had grown so powerful. The capital system contained dozens of worlds, each one dedicated to a different aspect of running a galactic empire. Shipyards orbited gas giants, producing new vessels at an incredible rate. Factory worlds processed resources gathered from across the galaxy. Training academies turned out new generations of Zephyrian officers, and at the center of it all was Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital world. "Take us into orbit," Ben ordered. "But stay hidden. I want to record everything." What they found on Zephyr Prime made Ben's blood boil. In the center of the capital city stood a massive monument celebrating the Empire's greatest victories. And at the very top of that monument was a section dedicated to the defeat of humanity, the Monument of Human Extinction, as the aliens called it. Displayed images from the final battle above Earth. It showed Jake Morrison's fleet being destroyed, Earth's cities burning, and the last human defenders dying in space. Beneath the images were inscriptions in multiple alien languages, all carrying the same message. "Here lies the proof that no species can stand against the Empire." But the monument was not just about the past. It was also about the present. Every year, the Zephyrians held a celebration to commemorate their victory over humanity. They invited representatives from all their subject species to witness the ceremony and remember what happened to those who dared to resist. Ben and Carol watched one of these celebrations through their ship's sensors. Supreme Commander Velthar himself spoke to the assembled crowd, his words translated into hundreds of languages. 500,000 years ago, Velthar said, his voice carrying across the plaza, a primitive species called humanity challenged the natural order of the galaxy. They believed that their crude weapons and barbaric culture could somehow defeat the advanced civilization of the Empire. Today, we remember their foolishness and celebrate our victory over chaos and disorder. The crowd cheered. Representatives from enslaved species applauded, though Ben could see the fear in their eyes. They had no choice but to celebrate the destruction of those who had tried to fight for freedom. "The humans are gone," Velthar continued, "but their memory serves a purpose. Let all beings know that the Empire is eternal, that resistance is futile, and that order will always triumph over chaos." Ben turned off the recording and sat back in his chair. Around him, his crew worked silently, but he could see the anger in their faces. These aliens had not just destroyed humanity's homeworld, they had turned that destruction into entertainment. "What are your orders, sir?" Carol asked. Ben looked out at the monument that celebrated his species' supposed extinction. In a few hours, he would begin the journey back to Haven Prime and the other colony worlds. He would report what he had seen to the Shadow Fleet commanders and the AI systems that still guided humanity's hidden civilization. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn that the humans were not extinct. They had been growing stronger in the darkness between the stars, preparing for this moment. The Zephyrians had built their empire on the bones of conquered species, but they had made one critical error. They had left humanity alive. "Set course for home," Ben ordered. "It's time to tell our people what we've found, and it's time to start planning our return." As the new frontier slipped away from Zephyr Prime, Ben took one last look at the monument of human extinction. Soon, he promised silently, that monument would become a monument to Zephyrian stupidity instead. The aliens thought they had won the war 500,000 years ago, but the war had never ended. It had just been paused while humanity prepared for the next round. And this time, humanity would not be the ones building monuments to the dead. The first attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning in Zephyrian space. The mining station above Kepler 442b was processing asteroid ore when it simply vanished in a flash of blue light. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only scattered debris and confused alien workers floating in escape pods. Supreme Commander Velthar read the report while eating breakfast in his palace on Zephyr Prime. Mining stations sometimes suffered accidents, so he wasn't particularly concerned. But then more reports started coming in. A communications relay near the border went dark. A patrol ship failed to check in. A supply convoy disappeared between two star systems. Each incident by itself could be explained away, but together they formed a pattern that made Velthar uneasy. Pirates? Suggested his aide, Commander Zakron. Perhaps, Velthar replied, but something felt wrong. The attacks were too precise, too coordinated. Pirates usually went after valuable cargo, not strategic installations. Meanwhile, in the shadow between dimensions, Commander Amy Foster smiled as she watched the Zephyrian rescue ships arrive at the mining station. Her strike team had done their job perfectly. The station was destroyed, but all the workers had been safely evacuated to their pods before the attack. This wasn't about killing innocent people. This was about sending a message. Amy's ship, the Ghost Runner, was invisible to normal sensors. Like all Shadow Fleet vessels, it could phase in and out of regular space using technology the Zephyrians couldn't even imagine. Her crew was small but elite. 12 humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Target eliminated, reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Joe Barnes. No casualties among the workers. Good, Amy said. Set course for the next target. And Joe, make sure to leave our calling card. At each attack site, the human ships left behind a small device that would broadcast a message when the Zephyrian rescue teams arrived. The message was simple, but terrifying. The humans remember. Across the galaxy, similar strikes were happening simultaneously. Commander Rick Stone led an attack on a Zephyrian fuel depot near the Andromeda border. Captain Ellen Davis destroyed a weapons research facility that had been developing new ways to control enslaved populations. Lieutenant Commander Paul Green eliminated a communication hub that coordinated slave labor across 12 star systems, but the most important strikes were happening on worlds where the Zephyrians kept their slaves. The planet Sigma-7 housed over 2 million enslaved beings from dozens of different species. They worked in massive factories, producing weapons and equipment for the Zephyrian military. The workers lived in crowded barracks, ate processed food, and never saw sunlight. Many had been born into slavery and knew no other life. Amy Foster's team materialized in the planet's upper atmosphere just after midnight. They dropped through the clouds like falling stars, their armor absorbing the heat of atmospheric entry. The Zephyrian guards never saw them coming. Teams Alpha and Beta, hit the guard towers, Amy ordered through her comm system. Team Gamma, secure the armory. Team Delta, get those slave collars off the workers. We have 30 minutes before their reinforcements arrive. The operation moved with clockwork precision. Human soldiers appeared from nowhere, their advanced weapons cutting through Zephyrian defenses like they were made of paper. The guards tried to fight back, but they were facing opponents who had spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. Tech specialist Ryan Clark worked frantically at the main control center, his fingers dancing over alien keyboards. As he hacked into the planet's security systems, Ryan was a master of cyber warfare, capable of turning the Zephyrians' own technology against them. "I'm in," he announced. "Disabling the slave collars now. Across the planet, millions of collar. Devices simply fell off. For the first time in centuries, the enslaved workers were free to move, to speak, to think for themselves. Many of them didn't understand what was happening at first. Freedom was a concept they had almost forgotten. Amy stood in the main factory, complex, addressing the confused workers through a translation device that could speak in hundreds of languages. "My name is Amy Foster," she said. "I represent the human race. We know what it's like to lose everything to the Zephyrians. We know what it's like to be told that resistance is hopeless. But we're here to tell you that it's not true. You can fight back. You can be free." She gestured to the crates of weapons that her team had brought. "These are for you. We've also uploaded instructions to your planet's computer systems. Everything you need to know about fighting the Empire is now available to you. But the choice is yours. We won't force you to fight." An old alien who looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird stepped forward. His scales were scarred from years of hard labor, but his eyes burned with new hope. "Are you really human?" he asked in broken galactic standard. "The Zephyrians say all humans are dead." Amy smiled. "The Zephyrians say a lot of things. Most of them are lies." She removed her helmet, showing her human face to the assembled crowd. "We've been waiting a long time for this moment. We've been preparing, growing stronger, learning, and now we're back." The liberation of Sigma-7 was repeated on dozens of worlds across Zephyrian space. Strike teams appeared without warning, destroyed the slave control systems, armed the workers, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Within a single week, over 50 million enslaved beings had been freed and equipped to fight for their own liberation. The psychological impact was enormous. For 500,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had been built on the idea that resistance was impossible. Subject species had been taught that the Empire was eternal, that their masters were invincible, that fighting back would only lead to destruction. Now, suddenly, there were humans everywhere. They appeared on Zephyrian communication networks, broadcasting messages of hope to enslaved populations. They showed up in the most secure facilities, proving that nowhere was truly safe from their reach. They demonstrated technologies that seemed like magic to species that had been deliberately kept ignorant. Ryan Clark's cyber warfare teams were particularly effective. They hacked into Zephyrian media networks and replaced propaganda broadcasts. With messages from the human colonies, they turned automated defense systems against their own masters. They made the Empire's own computers spread news of the liberation efforts to every corner of the galaxy. The message was always the same: humanity had returned, and they were not alone. Supreme Commander Velthar watched his empire begin to crack from 1,000 different pressure points. Rebellions were breaking out on worlds that had been peaceful for millennia. Slave populations were disappearing overnight, taking valuable equipment with them. His own commanders were reporting impossible things, ships that appeared and vanished. At will, weapons that could slice through any armor, and humans who moved like ghosts through supposedly secure facilities. "It's impossible," he told his war council. "The humans are extinct. We destroyed them 500,000 years ago." "Sir," said Commander Zakron nervously, "maybe we didn't get them all. Maybe some survived somewhere." Velthar stood up and walked to the window of his palace. Outside, he could see the monument of human extinction rising into the sky, its displays still showing the great victory his ancestors had won so long ago. "Find them," he ordered. "I don't care how many ships it takes or how much it costs. Find the humans and destroy them completely this time." But even as he gave the order, Velthar felt a cold fear growing in his chest. The humans had changed. The primitive species his great-grandfather had defeated was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. These new humans fought like shadows, struck like lightning, and vanished like smoke. For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Velthar began to wonder if the Empire could actually lose a war. The humans had spent 500,000 years preparing for this moment. They had turned their defeat into motivation, their exile into opportunity, their apparent extinction into the ultimate surprise attack. The Zephyrians were about to learn that some species don't stay dead. They come back stronger, smarter, and angrier than before. The ghost of humanity had returned to haunt the galaxy. Supreme Commander Velthar stood before the largest war fleet in Zephyrian history. 10 million ships filled the space around Zephyr Prime, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. Every available vessel had been recalled from across the Empire to deal with the human threat once and for all. Today, Velthar announced over the fleet communications, we finish what our ancestors started. The human ghosts have haunted our empire long enough. We will hunt them down, destroy their hidden bases, and ensure that not a single one of their kind survives. The assembled captains cheered, but Velthar noticed that their enthusiasm seemed forced. The past months had shaken their confidence. Ships had vanished without trace. Entire star systems had gone dark. Slave rebellions were spreading faster than they could be contained. The empire that had seemed eternal was beginning to crack. But Velthar refused to show weakness. The Zephyrian way was simple. When faced with a problem, you destroyed it completely. That had worked for thousands of years, and it would work now. Far from Zephyr Prime, in the hidden depths of space, Admiral Grace Turner watched the alien fleet through her ship's sensors. Grace was the great-great-granddaughter of Dr. Lisa Turner, the woman who had created the Genesis Protocol. Like her ancestor, she carried the hopes of humanity on her shoulders. "They're impressive," said her second-in-command, Captain Tony Ross. 10 million ships, I've never seen anything like it." Grace smiled. "Neither have they. Signal the Shadow Fleet. It's time to show ourselves." Around them, space began to shimmer and twist. Ships materialized out of nothing as the human fleet dropped out of phase space. But this wasn't the desperate handful of vessels that had defended Earth 500,000 years ago. This was an armada that had been built over centuries by dozens of human colonies working together. The human ships were beautiful and terrible. Their hulls seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed and shifted in impossible ways. They moved, without visible engines, bending space around them to travel faster than light. Some ships were massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Zephyrians had built. Others were small and quick, darting through space like living creatures. But the most shocking thing about the human fleet was its size. Where the Zephyrians had brought 10 million ships, humanity had brought 20 million. Each vessel carried technologies that the aliens couldn't understand, weapons that manipulated gravity and time, shields that existed in multiple dimensions, and crew members who had been enhanced far beyond normal human limits. "This is Admiral Grace Turner of the Human Shadow Fleet," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Supreme Commander Velthar, you have something that belongs to us." Velthar appeared on her main screen, his alien features twisted with rage and disbelief. "Impossible. We destroyed your species. We watched your homeworld burn." "You destroyed one generation," Grace replied calmly. "But humans don't give up easily. We learned. We adapted. We grew stronger. And now we've come home." The battle began without ceremony. Velthar, desperate to prove that his empire was still supreme, ordered his fleet to attack. 10 million Zephyrian ships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough energy to vaporize planets. But the human ships simply weren't there when the weapons arrived. They phased out of normal space, letting the alien fire pass harmlessly, through empty vacuum. Then they reappeared behind the Zephyrian formation and returned fire with weapons that defied explanation. Captain Mary Lee's destroyer fired a gravity lance that collapsed a Zephyrian battleship into a sphere the size of A basketball? Commander Nick White's cruiser released a swarm of nanobots that disassembled enemy ships atom by atom and rebuilt them as human vessels. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim's assault ship opened a miniature black hole that swallowed an entire enemy squadron. But the humans weren't fighting alone. Across the galaxy, the species that had been liberated from Zephyrian slavery were rising up. The lizard-like Draknari, the aquatic sea folk, the crystalline shimmers, and dozens of other species had all answered humanity's call to arms. They brought their own fleets, their own weapons, and their own burning desire for freedom. "This is High Commander Sektar of the Draknari Liberation Fleet," came a voice over the communication channels. "We stand with humanity against the oppressors." "The sea folk remember our debt," added Admiral Coral Singer of Deep Waters. "Your people freed us from the collar devices. Now we fight together." Velthar watched in horror as his supposedly unbeatable empire crumbled around him. His ships were being destroyed faster than he could count them. His allies were abandoning him. His slaves were turning against him. The natural order of the galaxy was collapsing. "How?" he demanded as Grace Turner's flagship approached his own vessel. "How did you become so powerful?" "We learned from our defeat," Grace replied. 500,000 years ago, your ancestors won because they were stronger than us. But strength isn't everything. We learned to work together instead of trying to dominate others. We shared our knowledge instead of hoarding it. We built alliances instead of making enemies. Her ship, the New Earth, was a masterpiece of human engineering. It had been built using resources from 50 different colony worlds and incorporated the best technologies that humanity had developed during their exile. But more than that, it carried the hopes and dreams of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered if they would see home again. "Your empire was built on fear," Grace continued as human Marines boarded Velthar's flagship. "Ours is built on hope. Guess which one is stronger?" The boarding action was swift and decisive. The human Marines moved through the alien ship like spirits, their enhanced abilities allowing them to fight in ways the Zephyrians couldn't counter. Within minutes, they had secured the bridge and captured Velthar himself. Grace Turner stood face to face with the alien commander who had spent his life believing that his species was superior to all others. Now, surrounded by humans who had evolved far beyond what they had been 500,000 years ago, Velthar looked small and frightened. "What will you do with me?" he asked. "That's not my decision to make," Grace replied. "That will be up to the new Galactic Council, the one where every species gets a voice, not just the ones with the biggest guns." Outside, the battle was ending. The Zephyrian fleet was destroyed or surrendering. Across the galaxy, the last symbols of the Empire were being torn down by liberated populations. The monument of human extinction on Zephyr Prime had been replaced by a memorial to all the species that had suffered under alien oppression. But the humans weren't interested in conquest. They had learned that lesson well. Instead of taking over the Zephyrian worlds, they helped establish new governments run by the people who actually lived there. Instead of enslaving their former enemies, they offered them the chance to join the new galactic community as equals. "We're not here to rule you," Grace explained to a gathering of species representatives. "We're here to make sure that no one rules over anyone else again. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to live in peace." Not everyone accepted this offer immediately. Some species needed time to heal from centuries of oppression. Others struggled to adapt to the idea of freedom after so long in chains. But gradually, a new order began to emerge from the ashes of the old empire. The human colonies that had spent 500,000 years hiding in the darkness finally revealed themselves. Haven Prime, Iron Mountain, Blue Harbor, Red Sand, and dozens of other worlds joined the galactic community. They brought with them technologies and knowledge that benefited everyone. Adam, the AI who had guided humanity's first steps on Haven Prime, was given a place of honor in the new government. His databanks contained the complete history of Earth, and he became the keeper of human memory for future generations. "The cycle is complete," he told Grace as they stood in the rebuilt capital of what had once been Zephyr Prime. "Dr. Turner's dream has come true. Humanity has not just survived, but become the guardians of freedom for the entire galaxy." Grace nodded, looking up at the stars that no longer seemed cold and hostile. She would be proud. They all would be. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in millennia. The age of empire and slavery was over, replaced by an age of cooperation and growth. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years learned to work together. Technologies that had been used for oppression were turned toward exploration and discovery. And at the center of it all were the humans, the species that had supposedly been extinct for 500,000 years. They had returned not as conquerors, but as liberators. They had proven that some things are stronger than death, hope, determination, and the refusal to give up. The Zephyrians had made one final mistake. They had assumed that destroying Earth meant destroying humanity. But humanity was more than just a planet. It was an idea, a dream, a promise that freedom and dignity were worth fighting for. That idea could not be killed by weapons or conquered by empires. It could only grow stronger, spreading from world to world until it filled the entire galaxy. The humans had come home at last. 6 months after the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, Admiral Grace Turner stood on the observation deck of the new space station orbiting Earth. The planet below was no longer the burned wasteland the aliens had left behind. Green forests were growing again, blue oceans sparkled in the sunlight, and white clouds drifted across continents that were slowly coming back to life. The restoration of Earth had been humanity's first priority after the war ended. Using advanced terraforming technology developed during their exile, human engineers had spent months healing the damage done 500,000 years ago. It was slow work, but every day brought new progress. "The atmosphere is almost breathable." "Again," reported Dr. Kevin Nash, the project's chief scientist. "Another few weeks, and we can remove the breathing masks in most areas." Grace nodded, but her mind was on other matters. Rebuilding Earth was important, but it was only one of many challenges facing the new galactic community. The fall of the Zephyrian Empire had created a power vacuum that someone needed to fill, and not everyone agreed on how that should happen. "Admiral," said her aide, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, "the council meeting is about to begin." Grace made her way to the station's main conference room, where representatives from hundreds of species were gathering. The Galactic Liberation. Council, as they called themselves, met every week to discuss the ongoing challenges of building a free galaxy. Today's meeting promised to be particularly difficult. The room buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages as aliens who had been enemies for centuries tried to work together. Some species wanted revenge against their former oppressors. Others demanded immediate independence for their homeworlds. A few even suggested that maybe the old empire hadn't been so bad after all. "The Draknari demand justice," declared High Commander Sektar, his scaled face twisted with anger. "The Zephyrians enslaved our people for 3,000 years. They must pay for their crimes." Murmurs of agreement came from several other species representatives. The desire for revenge was understandable, but Grace knew it would only lead to more violence. "The sea folk understand your pain," said Admiral Coral Singer of Deep Waters in her melodic voice. "But we must think about the future, not just the past. Revenge will not heal old wounds." The debate continued for hours. Some wanted to put all former Zephyrian officials on trial. Others wanted to strip the alien homeworlds of their resources as compensation for centuries of oppression. A few extreme voices even called for the complete destruction of Zephyrian civilization. Grace listened to it all with growing concern. This was exactly what humanity had hoped to prevent. The galaxy was finally free from tyranny, but freedom brought its own problems. Without a common enemy to unite against, the liberated species were starting to turn on each other. "What do the humans think?" asked Ambassador Kritos of the Crystalline Shimmers. "You led the liberation. Surely you have opinions on what should happen next." All eyes turned to Grace. She had been dreading this moment, but she knew it was inevitable. During the war, humanity had been seen as the natural leaders of the rebellion. Now that the war was over, everyone expected them to continue leading. "Humans believe that every species has the right to determine its own future," Grace said carefully. "We didn't fight this war to become the new rulers of the galaxy. We fought to ensure that no one would rule over anyone else again. But someone has to make decisions," protested General Thokmar of the militaristic Ironhide species. "The galaxy needs order, needs leadership. Without it, we'll have chaos." Grace could see heads nodding around the room. Many of the representatives were used to being told what to do by the Zephyrian Empire. The idea of making decisions for themselves was frightening to them. "Then let's create a system where everyone has a voice," Grace suggested. "Not one species ruling over others, but all species working together as equals." The idea sounded good in theory, but putting it into practice proved difficult. Species that had been enslaved for millennia didn't trust anyone, including each other. Former Zephyrian client states worried about losing their privileged positions. Newly liberated worlds demanded resources and technology to rebuild their civilizations. Meanwhile, other problems were emerging across the galaxy. On the former slave world of Gamma 12, riots had broken out between different ethnic groups who blamed each other for collaborating with their oppressors. In the Centauri sector, 3 species were fighting over who controlled the valuable mining, rights that the Zephyrians had once monopolized. Several former Zephyrian military commanders had gone rogue, taking their ships and crews to become pirates in the Outer Rim territories. Captain Danny Cruz's patrol ship, Freedom's Light, was one of many human vessels trying to keep the peace in these troubled areas. Danny had been born on the colony world of New Texas, and he understood better than most how difficult it could be to build something new from the ashes of the old. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Ensign Janet Kim, "we're getting distress. Calls from the mining station at Proxima 7. They say pirates are demanding tribute payments." Danny sighed. This was the 3rd pirate attack this week. "Set course for Proxima 7 and send a message to the local security forces. Ask them if they need assistance." "Sir," Janet said hesitantly, "the local security forces are the ones demanding the tribute." This was becoming a common problem. On many worlds, the collapse of Zephyrian authority had left a vacuum that was being filled by whoever had the most weapons. Some former slave overseers had declared themselves planetary governors. Some Zephyrian military units had simply switched from serving the Empire to serving themselves. When the Freedom's Light arrived at Proxima 7, Danny found a situation that was all too familiar. The mining station was surrounded by 3 former Zephyrian patrol ships whose crews had decided that collecting protection money was easier than finding honest work. "This is Captain Cruz of the Human Defense Fleet," Danny broadcast to the pirate ships. "You are attacking civilians in violation of the Galactic Liberation Accords. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came from the lead pirate ship. "This is Captain Zekval, formerly of the Imperial Navy. These miners are under our protection now. They pay us, we keep them safe. It's a fair deal." "Safe from who?" Danny asked. "Safe from us," Zekval replied with obvious amusement. The battle was brief but decisive. Human ships had technological advantages that the former Zephyrian forces couldn't match. Within minutes, 2 of the pirate vessels were disabled and the 3rd was fleeing toward deep space. But as Danny's crew helped repair the mining station, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting symptoms rather than the disease. For every pirate they defeated, 2 more seemed to appear elsewhere. For every dispute they mediated, 3 new conflicts broke out. "We can't be everywhere at once," he told Grace during his next report. "The galaxy is too big, and there are Too many problems. People are starting to say that maybe things were better under the Empire. Grace understood his frustration. Humanity had won the war, but winning the peace was proving to be much harder. The Zephyrian Empire had been evil, but it had also provided stability and order. Now that it was gone, chaos was spreading across the galaxy like a plague. We need to train more peacekeepers, Grace decided. Not just humans, but representatives from every species. Local forces who understand their own people and can handle problems before they get out of control. The Galactic Peace Corps, as it came to be known, became humanity's next great project. Training academies were established on dozens of worlds, teaching everything from conflict resolution to advanced tactical operations. The instructors were humans who had spent centuries preparing for war, but now they were teaching others how to keep the peace. The program wasn't perfect. Some graduates used their training to become better criminals rather than better peacekeepers. Others found themselves caught between loyalty to their own species and loyalty to galactic law. But slowly, gradually, a new kind of order began to emerge. It wasn't the rigid hierarchy of the old empire. It was something messier, more chaotic, but also more free. Different species found different ways to organize themselves. Some chose democracy, others preferred councils of elders, and a few even experimented with direct neural democracy using advanced computer networks. The important thing was that they got to choose for themselves. As Grace watched Earth's sunset, from the space station, she thought about how far they had all come. The galaxy was still far from perfect, but it was better than it had been. Freedom was messy and complicated, but it was still better than slavery. Humanity had kept its promise. They had not come back as conquerors, but as liberators. And now, together with their allies, they were building something new among the stars, something worth fighting for. Commander Beth Williams was having a perfectly normal day when the universe decided to remind her that nothing stays peaceful for long. She was aboard the research vessel Star Seeker, studying ancient ruins on a planet at the edge of known space, when her sensors picked up something that made her blood run cold. "Commander," called out her science officer, Lieutenant Mike Torres, "you need to see this." Beth moved to his station and looked at the readings. What she saw didn't make sense at first. The sensors were detecting massive energy signatures coming from deep space, far beyond the edge of the galaxy. The signals were unlike anything in their databases. "Could be a natural phenomenon," suggested Dr. Rachel Stone, the expedition's chief archaeologist. "Maybe a pulsar or a black hole merger?" But Beth had a bad feeling about this. In her experience, when something seemed too strange to be natural, it usually wasn't. "Mike, send a message back to Earth. Tell them we've found something unusual out here. And Rachel, keep working on those ruins. If these energy readings are what I think they are, we might need to understand what happened to the civilization that built this place." The ruins they were studying belonged to a species that had vanished mysteriously about 1,000,000 years ago. The buildings were massive and advanced, but everything had been abandoned suddenly. There were no bodies, no signs of war or disaster. The people had simply disappeared, leaving behind empty cities and unanswered questions. 3 days later, the answer to Beth's message came from Admiral Grace Turner herself. The New Earth dropped out of hyperspace with a full escort of human warships, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's red sun. "Commander Williams," Grace said, as she materialized on the bridge through the ship's holographic communicator. "Show me what you found." Beth transmitted all their sensor data. Grace studied it for several minutes, her face growing more concerned with each passing moment. "These energy signatures," Grace said finally, "they're not natural. Someone is building something out there, something big." "Who?" Beth asked. "The Zephyrians are defeated. Most of their fleet was destroyed or captured. Who else has this kind of technology?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was grim. "Maybe someone we haven't met yet." The investigation that followed revealed disturbing facts. The energy signatures were coming from a region of space that long-range sensors couldn't penetrate. Something was blocking their scans, creating a sphere of darkness about 50 light-years across. Whatever was happening in there, someone didn't want the rest of the galaxy to see it. But the most frightening discovery came from Dr. Stone's work on the ancient ruins. Using advanced translation software, she had finally decoded some of the inscriptions left behind by the vanished civilization. They called themselves the Eternals, Rachel explained to Grace during a briefing. According to their records, they were a peaceful species that explored the galaxy for knowledge rather than conquest. They had contact with hundreds of other civilizations, including some that still exist today. What happened to them? Grace asked. Rachel pulled up a holographic display showing the final entries in the Eternal archives. They detected something coming from outside the galaxy. Ships unlike anything they had ever seen. The Eternals tried to make contact but received no response. Then their frontier colonies started going silent, one by one. The records painted a terrifying picture. The unknown invaders had swept through eternal space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. The Eternals had fought back with weapons that could reshape matter and energy, but it hadn't been enough. In the end, they had chosen to evacuate their entire civilization rather than face complete extinction. Where did they go? Grace asked. The records don't say, Rachel replied. But there are references to something called the Great Journey. It sounds like they may have left this galaxy entirely, looking for a new home among the stars. Grace stared at the holographic display showing the empty eternal cities. 1,000,000 Tabandi years ago, another peaceful civilization had faced an invasion from beyond the galaxy. Now it seemed like history was about to repeat itself. We need more information, Grace decided. I'm authorizing a reconnaissance mission to the edge of that dark zone. We need to know what we're dealing with. Captain Alex Cooper volunteered to lead the mission. His ship, the Silent Shadow, was one of the newest vessels in the human fleet, equipped with the most advanced stealth technology available. If anyone could get close to the unknown threat without being detected, it was Alex. The journey to the Dark Zone took 2 weeks. As they approached the edge of the mysterious region, Alex's crew grew increasingly nervous. Their sensors showed nothing but empty space ahead, but they all felt like they were being watched. "We're at the perimeter," reported Navigator Ellen Price. "Still no contacts on sensors." "Take us in slowly," Alex ordered. "Full stealth mode. I want to know what's in there before they know we exist." The Silent Shadow crept forward into the darkness. For the first few hours, they found nothing unusual. Then, gradually, shapes began to appear on their long-range sensors. Ships, thousands upon thousands of ships, all gathered around what looked like a massive construction project. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Scott Davis. "What are they building?" Alex studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The alien fleet was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the force that had defeated the Zephyrian Empire. The ships themselves were unlike anything in human databases. They were sleek and predatory, designed for war rather than exploration or trade. But the construction project was what truly frightened him. The aliens were building something that defied description. A structure the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could crack planets in half. It was a war machine designed for one purpose, the complete destruction of galactic civilization. "Get us out of here," Alex ordered. "We need to warn the others." But as the Silent Shadow tried to retreat, alarms began blaring across the ship. They had been detected. "Incoming transmission," Scott reported. "They're trying to communicate." "Put it through," Alex said. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that looked like a cross between an insect and a machine. Its face was a mass of sharp angles and glowing sensors, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like metal grinding against stone. "Primitives," it said in perfect galactic standard. "You should not have come here. Your presence has been noted and recorded. The harvest will begin soon." "Harvest?" Alex asked. "What harvest?" "The galaxy is ripe," the alien replied. "Your species have grown numerous and developed interesting technologies. The devourers have watched and waited for 1,000,000 of your years. Now it is time to collect what we have sown." The transmission cut off, and enemy ships began converging on the Silent Shadow's position. Alex's crew worked frantically to escape, using every trick they had learned during the war against the Zephyrians. Somehow, they managed to jump to hyperspace, just as the alien weapons opened fire. When they returned to human space, Alex's report sent shockwaves through the galactic community. The Devourers, as they called themselves, were not just another conquering empire. They were something far worse, a species that treated entire galaxies like farms, allowing civilizations to grow and develop until they were ready to be harvested. "They've been watching us," Grace explained to an emergency session of the Galactic Liberation Council. "All of us. For millions of years, they've been waiting for this galaxy to reach the right level of technological development. Now they think we're ready." The revelation split the council. Some species wanted to flee, just as the Eternals had done 1,000,000 years ago. Others wanted to fight, but they remembered how difficult it had been to defeat just the Zephyrian Empire. How could they possibly stand against an enemy 100 times more powerful? "We can't run," declared High Commander Sektar of the Draknari. "This is our home. Our ancestors are buried in this soil. We will not abandon it to alien parasites." "The sea folk agree," added Admiral Coral Singer of Deep Waters. "The deep currents of space connect all life. We cannot let these devourers poison the cosmic ocean." But other species were less certain. The crystalline shimmers had already begun evacuating their core worlds. The peaceful gardener species had gone into complete hiding. Several former Zephyrian colonies had simply vanished overnight, their populations fleeing to unknown destinations. Grace looked around the council chamber at the faces of beings from hundreds of different worlds. Some showed determination, others fear, and many showed both. The galaxy that had just learned to live in freedom was about to face a test that would determine whether that freedom would survive. "We have maybe 6 months before they're ready to begin their harvest," Grace announced. 6 months to prepare for a war that will make our fight against the Zephyrians look like a minor skirmish. 6 months to decide whether we stand together or fall separately. Outside the council chambers, the stars continued to shine with ancient light, but now that light seemed cold and hostile, carrying the promise of an enemy that had been waiting in the darkness for 1,000,000 years. The galaxy's age of peace was about to end before it had truly begun.